Now let's see if we can create the spokes all the way around the hubcap here. So to do that, we're going to need to do a few things like move the origin of this object, and also we're going to need to create an empty. And an empty is an object that just has no surface, has no width or depth. It's just a single point. That's all it is. It's empty of anything else except that single point. And we're going to need to do that. We're going to need to create an empty right in here. And to do that, let's move the 3D cursor to this point with Shift S2. Right, so I've just selected the hubcap and then brought that cursor into the center of it. With that 3D cursor there, let's also take the origins of these objects and put them in here. So I'm going to come up here to Object, Set Origin, Origin to 3D Cursor. And let's do the same with the small one here, Set Origin to 3D Cursor. Okay, so we have these here. So when we rotate this in the x-axis, Rx, you can see it would go around that point right there. Okay, so now that we've got that in place, let's create an empty, and it will come in where that 3D cursor is. So I'll press Shift-A, empty, and we've got a lot of different ones here. Let's just do a plain axis here, right? So there is our single point right there, and that's it. That's all that object is. So let's give it a name. I'll press F2, and let's call this spoke large array. And this is just a temporary thing. We're going to delete these when we're done. But I just need to know which is which, because I'm going to do this for each one of the spokes. Now let's take that object there, and let's hit the N key. And we currently have values in the rotation. The scale is uniform, but I think I want to go ahead and apply that as well. So I'm going to press Control-A and apply the rotation and the scale. And then, actually I'm going to close this window. Let me join this here and then drag that up a bit so we have more room over here. So now with this selected, I'll go to the modifiers panel and add an array modifier. Now you can see what it's done. It's given us a duplicate of this in the x-axis. You can see the x factor here. If I click and drag, we can take this out closer and farther there. In addition, I can increase the count, and it will add more and more to that. But I don't really want to do any of that. I don't want to have a relative offset. I want to have an offset with an object, with that empty object, that spoke large array. So I'm just going to click on the eyedropper and then hover over that. And you can hover over it over here too in the 3D view. But if we click on that, what we can do is select that empty object and rotate it. So I'm going to hit the 3 key to go to the right orthographic view. And now if I just hit the R key and rotate it, look at what happens to our spokes. So now how many do we have? Let me go back over to our array. We have a count of 9. So this is how many that's being created from that original object. The number of duplicates. So I think I want 12 all the way around. Yeah, it looks like there are 12. So let's, for our count, let's put 11. So let's go back and select that empty, hit R, and here we go. We can just bring this out like this, all the way to about right there. I'm going to hold the Shift key down. And that looks pretty good right there. Right? I think that's okay. All right, so let's go with that for the large spokes. And then if we select that small spoke, I think I want to turn it just a bit like this. It looks like these are in between each other. Well, the way it is here, the small one is up at 12 o'clock here, but that's okay. I'm going to just move it over to the side here like that. And then we need to do the same thing for this object. So let's, at the 3D cursor, create a new empty object with Shift-A, empty, plain axes. Let's call this spoke small array. And then we want to add an array modifier to this small spoke. Add modifier array. We want to turn off relative offset. We want to apply the rotation and scale, right? So let's do that. Control-A, rotation and scale. And then we want to come down here to Object Offset, click on the eyedropper, and Spoke Small Array right there. Now, if we select that, let's turn it and see what happens. We'll hit the R key, and here we go. Well, we've only got one, right? Let's come back over here, and let's increase this count to 11. And there we go. Now let's go back to that array, that small spoke small array empty object, and we'll hit R, and let's see what we can do here. So I think it should probably go right about there, right? Let's see. I'm going to hide the empty objects here and here, and then I'll move the cursor back to the center of the grid with Shift S1, and there we go. What do you think? Yeah, that's not too bad, actually. Yeah, I think that'll work pretty well. So what let's do now is let's take each one of these, let's apply the array modifier, let's join these together, and then let's duplicate the tire and wheels to the other wheel wells here just to see how it's going to look, just to get a sense of it. So let's apply the array modifier, but actually, before we do now, let's think about converting these to polygons. Because if we don't convert these to polygons, then we're not going to be able to join them together with the polygon hubcap, right? So let's do that first. So let's select this, right-click, convert to a mesh. And there we go. Now if we tab into edit mode, we can see there are our polygons. And what it did, it went ahead and applied that array modifier so we could convert all of these at once. Now we could, if we wanted to, take this modifier away, convert it to a mesh, and then reapply the modifier, but I don't know that there's any real reason to do that. So this one here, let's just, once again, right-click, convert to a mesh. That'll apply the array, and all of these are now polygons. So let's take these, shift-click the hubcap, Control-J, and there we go. Now that's all an object called hubcap, and that's in our Nash-Healey collection. Now let's take a look at the wheel. The wheel has a subdivision surface modifier. That's fine. And it has a mirror modifier. We really don't need a mirror on it right now, do we? So let's just take that off. I'll just click the X, and we don't really need that. We'll build something in here when the time comes for that. So now we've got these two objects with subdivision surface modifiers on them. So let's take the wheel. Well, let's take the hubcap and the wheel and join them together. Control-J. And we'll just call that wheel, right? And then, at least temporarily, for now, I'm going to go ahead and apply a mirror and add a subdivision surface modifier to the tire just to see, because I just want to see how it's going to look. Ultimately, we may not keep that, but let me just apply this, and then I'll add a subdivision surface modifier. Yeah, that looks fine. And let's then add the wheel to the tire, Control-J, and now it's an object called tire. All right. So there we go. I'm going to move the origin to the center of the geometry. And there we go. Okay, now let's move these into place. As I said, we may not end up having all this joined together, but I just want to see how it's going to look. And it's just easier to duplicate and move when it's all one object. So Shift-D-Y. Let's move this over here. There we go. And then what we could do is take, we could take either of these and mirror these over. So maybe what I'll do is just take this one, move the origin to the 3D cursor, press Shift-D, Enter, Control-M, hit the X key, and Enter. And there we go. Now it's over here. Now I'll move that object origin back to the geometry, Control-1 to go to the other side, and I'll just press Shift-D-Y, and we'll just move this back just to see how it's going to look. All right. There we go. Now we're getting there. Yeah, that looks kind of cool. I just wanted to see it at some point in time, you want to begin to be able to see how things are going to look. So we're getting there. All right, well, I think in the next section, what I'd like to do is begin working on the interior. We're going to need to build some foundational pieces in there, the seats, the dash, things like that. And of course, the interior of the doors, the floor, all of that. So, in the next section of the course, let's begin working on that.